Hello and namaskar. Welcome to this special show on IIPA Stalwarts Speak, where we talk to a lot of bright minds. We try to learn from them, listen from them, and also get their insights, views, and perspective on issues related to public administration, to governance, to what India is also looking at. So now we have another bright mind. We have Shrityunjay with us. He's 2020 batch IAS officer, and he's also an assistant secretary who's joined us here in the session also. He's going to talk to us about success as in UPSC, civil services examination. He's talking about his new role as well. And let's hear from him only now. Shrityunjay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
So, first of all, let's begin from your current role. How does it feel to be here? We've talked about in the session, we've shared thoughts as to how responsible it is, but also challenging at the same time. What would you say?
Particularly, I want to speak about the role as an assistant secretary now with the government of India. I think it gives us a large sort of exposure to how policy making actually happens at the highest levels of decision making in the country, which has an impact on a lot of people. And we've all been given projects as well. And these are individual projects, and they could become schemes, policies in the months and years to come. So a lot of effort has to be put into understanding what is the core problem that is being given to us in terms of projects. So it is interesting because there are a whole range of stakeholders who we get to meet here. Because while we were at the field before this, when we were in a district training, it was more at the district level, and our level of engagement with experts, with people from different parts of the same sort of domain, but looking at it from different aspects was limited there. Here we get to access that. It also helps us to go deeper into the problem that we are trying to solve. I'm in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship now. And I'm working on a very interesting project of international migration of skilled Indians. So it's a whole new domain of understanding visa requirements, of qualification frameworks that exist in other countries. So it's a very interesting exposure at the moment.
And we are in a time of our country, as I would say, we are ushering into a new era of governance, public administration, new things that we are learning. The digital side is that we are really trying to be good at and spread it far and wide. What would you say about the times that we are in and your role then as a civil servant?
The biggest successes in India in terms of governance, it could be elections, it could be digital payments, it could be with UPI as the basic framework. The best ways to sort of solve population scale problems, which is what India currently needs, is to understand how the citizen accesses government services. So in India, we would want it to be very easy, intuitive applications. It needs to be very low cost, so you wouldn't want cost to be a barrier to any sort of entry. And you would also want it to reduce time or inconvenience of actually accessing a particular service. To that extent, I think our role becomes very interesting, because now if we're speaking about digital payments now, that is something that is solved. Probably the next sort of problem would be rural livelihoods, rural e-commerce, because all of us are working in the domain of livelihoods, right? Self-help groups. There are projects like one district, one product, geographical indicators. So while we've all identified these products, the problem now arises in kind of getting them forward linkages to markets. So one of the things that in many departments that all of us are working on, and there's the government is also trying to come up with an open source e-commerce platform of sorts. But it would be for us to kind of see how we can probably onboard, all of these producers, self-help groups, farmer producer organizations onto these kind of platforms, and encourage them to probably use all of them to market those products. And even if that doesn't come, I think now all of many of our interventions is again around standardization, quality accreditation of products, where blockchain is something many of us are speaking about. Blockchain might seem like a very big term, but just using QR codes across processes, which is very simple. And there are government schemes and subsidies that are given for these kind of innovations.
Do you see your role then, or your task as such, very well charted out, that how you can actually help people, simplify the processes and get them closer to governance as such?
Absolutely. So the initial aspect, like even now, how would they avail services without, the interference of, bureaucracies, which probably delays certain delivery of services and all of that. How can we make the entire process simple for citizens? And our role would become those of enablers or facilitators for them to kind of understand that these kind of tools and platforms exist, and if they get on that, their entire scope of income, livelihood, access to government services is largely eased out and enhanced as well.
Okay, let me take you back a little bit to your exam side also, because there is an audience which is looking at you as UPSC aspirants also. So take us there and talk about the exam preparation side, the technical side of how one should prepare and all that.
I come from I don't have anybody from the bureaucratic background, so it does take a little bit of time to sort of understand the mechanics of the entire exam. But nevertheless, I think with a lot of content and much like what you're putting out now as well, I think what is supposed to be done in terms of the technical components of the exam, be it the syllabus, be it the old question papers, kind of understanding, having a sort of a time management schedule to sort of read, study and have a certain discipline. I think many toppers have already spoken about this. In particular areas where I found it difficult, and which I think it might be useful for aspirants now to think about, is on working on their own sort of emotional intelligence of sorts, because the competition is very, very large today and it's a competitive exam. There are private sector jobs as well which is available, and people in the age group of 22 to 30, and they are largely preparing for this exam. There's also this entire aspect of earning, of not making money while they're preparing for this exam. So how are you sort of creating a system of support which makes you emotionally intelligent to tackle this exam? For which I would say, first thing, your intent of why you're coming for this needs to be very clear, because you have a lot of options available even in the private sector. And now, while working with Government of India, we're realizing that it could be consulting, it could be think tanks, it could be research organizations. So there are various
other stakeholders.
There are other stakeholders, and there are other pathways as well. If not this,
then that.
Right? So I think that sort of exposure is not still available for many people who are aspiring for this job. So when you have that sort of an exposure, you kind of have plan B, C. It kind of reduces the overall stress that one goes through while preparing for this exam. So that will be my first part of getting acquainted to this entire gamut of areas where you can kind of be part of the development sector.
So basically you're saying broadening your vision also.
Broadening your vision of, engaging in the public domain or in public service does not mean only this service. But having said that, of course, this exam and this role does give you such a diversity of opportunities to work in, as well as the scale of impact which you can make is immense. For which I think to kind of understand what are your trigger points, what are your stress points, and how are you going to have that's a kind of buy-in from your parents. So in my second attempt, and I didn't clear in my first attempt, I realized personally for me, giving an entire year for this exam full-time would not work. And I also realized that probably I don't do very well in high intense exam stress situations. So two things that I did was I took up a job. So I was working, and I had to put in a lot of hard work there, because I kind of worked night shifts and all of that, because I could get more time to work. So my own productivity was optimized, because when resources are scarce, you would want to use it well. So because I had...
You were already a corporate mind.
Yeah,
when you were actually prepared.
I had to work a lot, I had to optimize on every minute that was available to me. So I did that. And I also focused a lot on yoga and aspects like physical fitness, and also to kind of be prepared mentally for any sort of an outcome or the situation that happens in the exam hall. Because if you're into this entire process, you start predicting what the question paper would be like. You think that because you've read all of these things, you will be able to kind of crack it. I mean, all of us have that sense of hope, but it could also become a sort of overconfidence, or it could become disappointment if you have a lot of expectation of what and how the exam paper is going to be. So it took some time for me to orient myself to this sort of agnostic to whatever comes in the paper. Let me focus on what is given to me at hand. So a larger perspective again with respect to the exam, because people study in silos again, that they would think of it as prelims, mains, and then interview. But I looked at it as a holistic process, right? You need to have certain skills that is required to crack this exam. Prelims requires stress management skills, because 2 hours, 200 questions. Mains requires a certain kind of comfort with articulation, clarity of thought, which can then be penned down to paper. And interview is a little bit about self-awareness. So I looked at it like this. And even if I was working in the corporate sector, I would look at everything from this framework. If I was writing a mail to a customer, I would think like, okay, how short and crisp am I writing that? Right? Am I able to articulate?
You charted out everything that I ever needed to ask. My last question would be, as I'm asking everyone, is about Vision India in 2047, 25 years hence. How would it would be? What's your idea?
I think go back to the entire, very keen about this area of emotional intelligence, happiness, and all of that.
Okay.
Bhutan has a gross national happiness
index.
I think by 2047 we would be in a world where I think in the Maslow's hierarchy we would have sort of come up in most societies, and definitely sure in a country like India. So how are we able to sort of build trust in society? Can we move on to become a country where there's a lot more trust, where we collaborate more, where caregiving and of mutual sort of support becomes inherent to how we probably live in smaller communities, and we are happy in those communities, and we wouldn't have to like constantly compete for resources.
I think you've just pinned down your role also here very well, Shrityunjay, where you talked about how in fact your role as a civil servant, you can touch upon lives and make them or give them little window where they feel really sad.
Just one last point, and in a very tangible outcome, I would say, I've always dreamt of the cleanest rivers. So 2047, I would want our tap water to be from our own, tap water to be like portable and drinkable.
One clear agenda coming from you here. Any tips for young people who are watching you, how to really look at not only an exam but also life maybe?
I mean, we're all learning, and that's the biggest learning in the last 2 years, and especially with today's session as well. Most people who've been successful in whatever domain are constantly sort of challenging themselves, and it does not come very easy. The entire aspect of clearing this exam and all of that, it stayed with us for very few months. All of us are again back to this entire journey of redefining our goals and sort of constantly wanting to learn, upskill, and I'm in the Ministry of Skills as well, so upskilling and reskilling becomes very, very important. And it's not something which is, it's not a sad thing. It's not this constant curiosity, and the more drive you have towards that, I think it keeps people happier and more successful in the long run. So whoever we're meeting, even secretaries to Government of India, it's just how agile they are with their thinking and how open they are to so many ideas. I think that's something that I would certainly want to inculcate in myself. And in whichever domain people are working, I think we're all living in exciting times in India, and partnerships and collaboration is going to increase. So I think kind of open-mindedness to learning and sort of collaborating is something that we should all.
You have said it all here, Shrityunjay, and I'm sure they are really going to benefit as much as I have maybe or learned here in this interview. So thank you so much for talking to us, and I wish you all the very best. And that was Shrityunjay for us, talking to us here at IIPA. We wish him all the best, and thank you for watching this show.